Hello, I'm Ronald Day, Associate Vice President of the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy, and welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the criminal justice system from various perspectives, including from those most impacted by the system. We discuss critical questions about how the system works, its intersection with social justice, and highlight the efforts that are being made to improve the lives of everyone that is affected by it. We ask you, the viewer, to spread the word about Both Sides of the Bars and share your comments with us on Twitter at The Fortune Society. So today I have with me two guests that are going to discuss the issue of criminal justice debt. So I'm going to introduce you. So I have Matali Negrecha, who was a Senior Director of Policy at the Fortune Society, and she's now an attorney in private practice. And I have with me also Mr. Antoine O'Gara.
Yes.
Is that correct, Mr. O'Gara?
Yes.
Who is currently a participant at the Fortune Society and who has been impacted by the issue of criminal justice debt. So what I want to do first is turn it over to Matali so that you can frame the discussion for us around criminal justice debt. I know that you wrote a couple of papers, co-authored a couple of papers, and one of them is When All Else Fails, Finding the Family, which I found to be a pretty provocative title. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about criminal justice debt from the perspective of framing it for our audience?
Sure. So criminal justice debt refers to fees and fines that are charged to people when they're involved in the criminal justice system.
Yes.
And over the last few years, I and others have written about how this debt impacts individuals' reentry experience. And what we've found is that these debts are not insignificant, that the court fees and the probation fees and the child support add up to a significant amount of money. And it's very difficult for people to pay when they've been in prison for some time. And so we found that there's significant reentry impact because individuals come home from incarceration and they're trying to get back on their feet.
Yes.
And this is one major stressor as they're still looking for a job and dealing with, the discrimination that they face because of their record and all the other sort of issues we know that impact people when they're coming home. And in this particular paper, the one that you mentioned, we talk about how in addition to the reentry impact of this debt, that individuals, family and friends are also impacted. And so, their family and friends really want to support their loved ones, and so they end up helping the person pay and otherwise support them so that their loved one doesn't end up facing driver's license revocation or warrants, arrest, incarceration, and the other sort of penalties involved associated with criminal justice debt.
Got it. How does the issue impact families, which is something that your paper focused on?
So what we found is that, as I referenced a bit, that in about 70% of the individuals we spoke to, so this paper really is individual stories, and so we interviewed about 40 people in New York and New Jersey, and we found that 70% were relying on their family and friends to help them with their criminal justice debt. And so we're talking about a number of people, about 15, who said they were living with their family and friends. A good number, I think it was around 12 out of the 39, said they were actually getting money from their family and friends. And the reason this is all the more significant is a lot of people who are returning home from incarceration are going back to communities that are also financially stressed and poor. And so you have people who are also trying to make ends meet now, supporting this person that they love so that they don't end up in trouble again. And so we really wanted to sort of shed light on this broader impact in society.
Got it. So Antoine, you're someone who has experienced personally criminal justice debt. Can you tell us from your experience, what occurred and kind of like frame the issue from your perspective?
Okay, like when individuals get incarcerated, we're hit with fines, court fees, and things of that nature. So during the course of the incarceration, you know, if you're working, they'll take some money out, and if you're not working, they'll just deduct anything that's coming from the family. But some people don't work because they don't want no money taken out of their money. So you know, it's hard.
So you're saying that some people decide not to work rather than to pay debt?
Than pay the debt. Well, because it's.
What about your experience?
Well, my experience is it was hard for me. You know, like I didn't have that much support. I had family support as far as carrying letters and things, visits, but as far as the money situation, it was tight. Like parents is retired, so they on fixed incomes. You know, the spouse is like, you know, got to take care of the child, so you don't want to take out the kid's mouth. So you know, you tend to. Well, I tended to just sacrifice and not have anything, you know, and just let basically the prison take care of me, you know, and it was hard. It was hard, and then to come home and still accumulated a debt for child support, the court fines that wasn't able to be paid due to not having the work, and the restitution being the extensive amount and continue to go up if you can't pay, like interest, like so you know it was hard on me.
So you had child support, any other debt that was associated with your involvement in the criminal justice system?
Yeah, I was on ankle monitor. They charged me for being on the ankle monitor.
Can you explain that a little bit for the audience?
When you get in trouble, it's like a violation of my probation, my federal probation, and in order for me to stay out of the prison at some point, they put me on an ankle monitor to monitor my movements, put me in a program. So basically they try to say that I can stay out of trouble if they can monitor me.
So it was an ankle bracelet?
Yes, it's an ankle bracelet. They tie it around your ankles, and they charge me for it.
Okay. And what were the fees associated with that?
But they charged me like $4 a day, and I was on it for like 3 months. Okay. And I wasn't working, so that accumulated to like $400, $500. Now to the point where I can't pay it, so now they put it in judgment. So now I'm in judgment, so my credit's gonna be messed up now because I can't afford to pay that right off the bat.
Sure.
And you know, along with the child support that's in judgment because of the arrears, and that accumulates more because I'm not able to pay for it because I don't have no employment. Just came out of prison. Like she said, they frown upon individuals that's come home from prison with the records, the extensive criminal history, you know. So it'd be challenging to find jobs. So when you get the minimum wage job, like I did, it wasn't enough to even to support myself or pay the child support. So I'm still in a bind, you know.
And so, Matali, how does this work? I mean, I've read your report, and I see that a lot of people are ending up with a significant amount of debt. I'm talking about in the tens of thousands at times. How does the court determine that this amount is what should be paid, and do they look at whether or not a person, as Antoine is saying, can pay the debt? How is that worked out?
So it varies quite a bit from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and depending on the fee and the fine you're talking about. But overall, there are a few reasons that the amounts are so high and really too high for an individual to pay when they're coming home. And so the first issue with child support especially is that the amounts are quite significant. They continue to accrue you know, on a regular basis, and they were usually set when someone was working, or they were set in default, and so the amounts are not tied to someone's actual current ability to pay. And under the law, in some states, including it used to be in New York, and there are some changes there, but overall, under the law, your child support can continue to accrue while you're in prison, and won't necessarily be reduced to take into account that you can't work or that you're working for prison wages, which are, you know, a few cents an hour versus wages on the outside. And so, you know, you're in prison, you're paying that same amount that you, or you're rather accumulating that same amount of debt you were accumulating outside, but you're not working. And so that is something that can definitely add up very quickly. And now on the other fees too, there's no, in a lot of places, there's no real requirement that they be tied to someone's ability to pay. And so, for example, the ankle monitoring payment of, I think you said $4 a day, would generally, it's not that, you know, it's not that some court looked at your financials and said, this is what you can afford. You know, that's just sort of the blanket charge that's charged to everyone, and they're not taking into account whether, you know, one person's working or not working, or able to pay or not able to pay. And they're also not taking into account what other fees this person's paying. So you might owe, you know, some amount to probation, some to child support, some to the court, and no one's really talking to each other to really figure out, you know, what can this person reasonably pay.
Got it. I mean, what about the notion, though, that individuals involved in the criminal justice system, they committed crimes, and that a way for them to make amends is to pay back debt that is owed. Sometimes if it's child support, then it might be to the mother, or it might be to the courts. So, you know, what is the position that you have on that particular issue, Natalie?
I think there are a lot of ways to respond. A few things come to mind. I think one is that the fees and fines we're talking about are not, they're not the fines that are sort of substitute as your penalty, or the, you know, the equivalent of incarceration. Theoretically, right? So we're not saying, you know, you did X and the court found you guilty and your penalty is this financial penalty. We're talking about amounts that are sort of separate from that. And it's really a new phenomena that we've sort of decided that people who are in the system should sort of subsidize the cost of the system.
Yes.
And so what we're really saying is that, you know, this was a new policy that became popular over the last 30 to 40 years, and let's really look at whether that's working and makes sense. And you know, you can see the kind of appeal in saying, if you're in the system, you should pay for it. But practically speaking, how is this playing out for people? Because we're also saying we want people to go into the criminal justice system and come out and become productive members of society, and this debt doesn't help people get there. It's overwhelming, and it's not, you know, it's not rationally tied to individuals' experiences and ability to pay when they come home.
Yeah. I mean, how is it playing out? How is it playing out for you, Antoine?
It's rough, but I'm making it due to my help at the Fortune Society that I'm getting. They got a great family service program that helped me find ways to counter how to get the child support reduced, you know, and that helped. That helped a lot, like drastically. So that took a little pressure off me. They have a program in there that helps me work, so I get some hours, 2 hours a day, you know, 5 days a week, bi-weekly. So, you know, I'm able to pay some child support payments, pay some restitution payments. So I'm not running. So that's my whole thing. Like, some people, like, they run from the debt that they accumulate, and I'm not running. So basically I'm running head on with it.
Okay. So you're addressing the issue. But what about the idea that some people say this is debt that you incurred based upon your involvement in the criminal justice system? Do you think that's a fair view?
No, I don't. Because you did a crime. Of course, I did a crime.
Sure.
My penalty for my crime was to do time in prison. They incarcerated me. They locked me away from my family. But then they charged me for it, which I don't see that to be right. But I don't make the rules. But I'm subjected to have to deal with them one way or another. You know, if I don't pay, I'm going back to prison. Yeah. You know, if I pay, then I did time and I paid y'all. You know, so overall it's just difficult to deal with. You know, some people ain't strong enough to deal with it. Some people are. I guess I'm fortunate to be one of the stronger individuals to deal with it, you know.
Got it. What about the notion, Matali, that some jurisdictions have been, in as much as they can, trying to garnish people's wages and has been very forceful in trying to secure the funds that are owed to them? I mean, is there a way that they can just say this debt is relieved without it being paid, or are these jurisdictions, municipalities, and so forth really looking forward to, as much as possible, receiving those funds?
There are absolutely ways for jurisdictions on a lot of the debt to make it more reasonable and to help people sort of either pay or to reduce the amount so that people can pay. It really does depend probably on the fee and the place. But overall, there are things we can do to make this easier and better.
Yes.
And I think, you know, when you look at the stories of the people that we talk to, it is these punishment mechanisms and these enforcement mechanisms that are impacting people's lives and making them turn to their family to be able to pay it all. And so, you know, one interview comes to mind, you know, where an individual had a 4th grade reading level, you know, and you know, talked a lot about just how overwhelming the whole system was, and you know how he couldn't really understand even, you know, when the child support was due, or you know what the process was in court, or couldn't make arguments to explain to the judge, for example, that he couldn't pay. And, you know, over 30 years had struggled with addiction, and he would work. He would, you know, here and there would have jobs. And he would say that, you know, the child support was just so high and the garnishment took away so much of the check that it just seemed so frustrating to work at all. And it seemed so frustrating and overwhelming to feel like you were ever going to come out from under this. And I think absolutely there are ways we can do that better. And, you know, really focus on what people can really afford, not, you know, what they can afford by asking their friends, or what they can afford by couch surfing and then putting all their money towards this, and to really think critically about, you know, how to do this in a more fair way. Yeah.
I mean, this has been referred to as the new punishment regime, and it's very stealth in the practice. How widespread is this issue? I mean, how known is it as well to criminal justice policy folks?
You know, it's hard to say how widespread it is. I could tell you that when I did the research for this paper, what we did was we went to agencies like Fortune and similar programs in New York and New Jersey, and we just asked them to talk to clients who had, you know, had some experiences with debt. And it's not like it was hard to find people. I mean, very quickly they were able to, you know, find clients in the building who were willing to talk to us about this. And so I think if that's any indication, it's pretty prevalent as an issue for people. You know, as to how much people are thinking about it, I think people are talking about it more and more. And I think actually there is some recognition, you know, across the political spectrum and in a lot of different circles that this is an issue. And I think people are thinking, you know, more about, you know, how can we forgive child support debt if it's, you know, accumulated to $20,000, and how can we work creatively to make sure that the child is taken care of, but also that this person isn't, you know, ruining his credit and sitting with all this debt and stress.
And how do individuals and families get support to address this issue? Antoine, you mentioned the help that you got at the Fortune Society. Are there other places, firms that helped out? Is there any other assistance that you received?
Well, public assistance that helps out because, you know, due to me just being released from prison, I don't have no medical, so, you know, that helped me. So I don't have to pay the extra high co-pays and all that to go see a doctor, make sure that I have my medicine, you know, because people come out of there with high blood pressure from the stresses, things. You know, it helps me with food, you know, because I'm not working currently. But, well, not working to where I'm getting a hefty check, you know, to be able to take care of a lot of responsibilities that I have. But I don't want to be a burden on my family, so I do little things to make sure that I'm just not there. Like, you know, I'm just not sitting around. I'm doing things that the Fortune Society, as far as like the employment services. You know, they have employment services that help you get jobs, prepare you for interviews, job interviews, send you on job interviews. You know, they got stipend programs that which I'm enrolled in. They give me the 2 hours a day for 5 days a week. Give me by pay. You know, so I'm taking advantage of the opportunities that's presented to me through Fortune Society, and there's a lot of opportunities that they do have, and people need to take advantage of it, you know, because the debt situation is rough.
And you know what that makes me think of too is, you know, I think when you know, if you're in the legislature and a new fee is passed, it's really easy to say that, you know, an individual should take responsibility and they did this crime. But when you look at the reality, the stories are much more like yours. And I think what it demonstrates to me is that, you know, you are trying, that you're working and working the job you're able to get right now, and that you're paying what you can towards your debt, and that, you know, you're also trying to engage in services to, you know, better your skills, so you'll have a, you know, you're doing all the right things, and so someone like you shouldn't be stressed about this, right? And so I think that's the policy recommendation, or that's kind of the ideal place we want to be in, so that you know, that isn't a source of stress. And I think, you know, the other thing that we looked at too is a lot of the research shows that that you want strong family relationships for people who are coming home from prison, and you don't want this debt to be a stressor. And I think a lot of people also say what you said, which is, you know, you don't want to rely on your friends, you want, and your family, you want to do this on your own, and you, and I think you don't want it to be a stressor in those relationships. And so, you know, again, I think ideally, you know, if the debt wasn't so high, we'd have better reentry outcomes.
And does the research show that, like, the individuals that you spoke to for the studies, are they willing to pay the debt? Because, you know, there's also pretty prevalent ideas that some people are just like trying to avoid as much as possible paying debt, possibly trying not to hold down jobs, and some going into the underground economy because of debt associated.
You know, my sense was that the vast majority, if not all, of the people we spoke to wanted to do right, and they were trying to do right, and they were, you know, paying what they could, or, you know, or doing things that we don't calculate in our system. So, for example, we spoke to a lot of people who couldn't pay, and they were having a tough time getting a job, but they actually were the primary caregiver for their child when they came home because the child's mother was working. Or, you know, they would otherwise contribute to households in these informal ways that, you know, the child support system doesn't take into account. So I think, you know, the vast majority of people want to try. I also think it's reasonable to be overwhelmed and say, well, if you're going to take out 60% of my paycheck towards debt, well, what's left, and is this really worth it? And so,
what about as we get towards the end of the show? What about some policy recommendations? Because we do want people to know, you know, what you all recommend from the research that you were able to do.
Sure. So I think our first policy recommendation in the paper is to put a moratorium on new fees and fines or increases in the amounts before we, you know, to not enact new ones until we really take a look at what is happening, how these debts are impacting people, and really think through this policy that has sort of kind of crept up on us over the last 30, 40 years. The second is, to the extent that we're going to have fees and fines, and there will be some, that they really be tied to someone's ability to pay, and that we be very thoughtful about what that means, and to not include what they can pay by relying on family and friends who are also trying to make ends meet. We don't think child support should accrue while someone's in prison and making, you know, very little money. We think all the agencies that are trying to collect should talk to each other, and so, you know, that there's kind of more coordination. And then again, to the extent that a jurisdiction is really compelled to have a new fee or fine, that they include a re-entry impact statement. And there's an example in Massachusetts, I believe, where they did just that. They had passed a jail fee, and then they sort of stepped back and looked at what they thought the reentry impact was, and they decided it was actually not a great idea.
Yeah.
And so I think if if jurisdictions thought through the reentry impact and whether they were doing it in a thought, enacting this fee in a thoughtful way, that we would also get more dialogue, and maybe we'd pause before we
Yes.
pile the debt on. So.
What closing thoughts do you have, Antoine?
I believe that it can be worked out if a person just take their time, focus on the bigger picture. It is work out there. No matter how minimum it is, just take advantage of the opportunities that's afforded to you and work it. Like, it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be rough at times, but it's going to be beneficial to you in the future. Me, my kids, my wife, my mom, all my siblings would be better off in the future.
Exactly. I mean, this issue impacts individuals and families, as you said. So, as you noted, you want to take care of the debt.
Yes.
You're not trying to avoid it. So it's very encouraging to know that. And the people that you interviewed as well. So thank you both for being on the show. We really appreciate you taking the time out. Antoine, for you telling your story, and Matali, for you coming and continue to do the research and keep us informed and let us know about new recommendations as well. All right?
Yeah,
Thank you.
So thank you to our guests, Matali, and to Antoine for joining us on both sides of the bars today. And thank you in TV Land for joining us as well. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please check us out on the web at fortunesociety.org or on Facebook by typing in the Fortune Society. This is Ronald Day as we critically look at both sides of the bars. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Antoine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matali.
Thanks.